The Philistines they've been a kind of a mysterious group of people for a long time, and it's only just recently that we know who they are. They show up and you find story after story after story where the Israelites are having to contend with the Philistines, because this is happening right at the beginning. The turn from the Bronze Age to the Iron Age is they had iron weapons and the Israelites did not. So they have found a jar with the Anakim name on it. So Egypt looked at the Anakim and they had problems with this people group called the Anakim. That you have Egyptians that are next to these kneeling Shasu, and these people are gargantuan. Kneeling, they're every bit as tall as the Egyptians are, which is crazy because in Egyptian artwork, you always find the Egyptians larger than their enemies.
I found this video very fascinating because this channel called Under the Hood, they explain the significance of the Philistines in their battles between the Israelites before David and Goliath come into the picture. Let's get into it. Shout out to their channel, go subscribe, and I will have the entire video in the description below, but let's get right into this.
Yeah, so actually the Philistines they've been a kind of a mysterious group of people for a long time, and it's only just recently that we know who they are. They kind of just all of a sudden appear on the coast of the Mediterranean sometime around 1200. And they actually drive away some of the Israelites who used to be coastal peoples from the tribe of Dan, one of the 12 tribes. They relocate. When the Philistines come, they're like, we're out. These guys are way, way too advanced. So they go way north, and the Philistines live in the coastal towns on the Mediterranean about 1200. So if you're in the Bible, that's going to be during the time and the period of the Judges. And so sometime around 1200 BC, they show up, and you find story after story after story where the Israelites are having to contend with the Philistines.
If the Israelites had any rivals during their time as in the Old Testament, it would have to be the Philistines. There's no one else that seems to be taken aback by them. Maybe they have giants, maybe they have technology, and they talk about this, that they have superior technology and weaponry, which is crazy to think about.
Samson, which is one of the figures at the end of the book of Judges, is constantly getting into it with the Philistines. When Samuel comes along, or the first king that comes along, King Saul, they're constantly having to deal with the Philistines. And one of the things that made the Philistines a real threat, because this is happening right at the beginning, the turn from the Bronze Age to the Iron Age, is they had iron weapons and the Israelites did not.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure Gideon as well was facing the Philistines, and they needed God's help. They just had pitchers and horns, it seems like. I mean, God used that to cause them to go crazy, essentially, and they started to fight themselves. But they keep on fighting these Philistines.
It's a huge advantage, obviously. So they're militaristic. They're kind of a serious people that you don't want to fight.
That's correct. And the Bible talks about this. In 1 Samuel 13, it says, "Now there was no blacksmith to be found throughout all the land of Israel, for the Philistines said, 'Let the Hebrews make themselves swords or spears.' But every one of the Israelites went down to the Philistines to sharpen their plowshares, their mattock, their axe, or their sickle." And so what that's saying is the Philistines actually had control over the Israelites, and they were saying, you're not allowed to have technology for your weapons that would make them iron, which shows you who's running the show.
Yeah, that's not where you want to be as the people of Israel.
No.
You can't win a battle if they have superior technology.
That's correct. And the Philistines kept them from having iron weapons. And one of the cool things that they have discovered from all of the strata when they dig down and they're looking at the civilization during this particular time period, when you go to the Philistine towns, just like the Bible claims, you find iron weapons during this time. And in all of the Israelite towns, they're still using bronze daggers and knives and spearheads. And
Wow. Yeah, I want to know, what's the difference like between a bronze weapon and an iron weapon? I know like iron's so much heavier and stronger, but like, would that really make a difference in a battle? Most likely. It's just hard for me to wrap my head around. I wonder what size of the weapons were. We watched the show Bible Expedition. They had massive spearheads. I wonder if that was iron or not. I don't remember. I guess that didn't have as much of a significance to me.
It's exactly as the Bible says. That's what you find in the archaeological record too. So the Philistines, they're militarily far more advanced than the Israelites of this time.
And so that's important background to know now as we enter into the story of the fight between David and Goliath.
Yeah, that's right. And so when you're in the Bible, you go to 1 Samuel chapter 17, and that's where you find the story of David and Goliath. The way that this unfolds, like, it starts telling you some of the geography of what's going on, and the geography is important. So in verse 1, it says, "Now the Philistines gathered their armies for battle. They gathered at Soko, which belongs to Judah." So that's the Israelites. So they're in their turf. They're encamped there between Soko and Azekah, and then it says at Ephes Damim, and what we don't know Hebrew, so that's like, what is it? The word Ephes Damim literally means the border of blood, and so you've got to imagine, here's the Philistine territory, here's the Israelite territory, the Valley of Elah, where this is going to take place, is right on the border. And the reason why it's called the border of blood is this is where all their skirmishes for territory and land have traditionally happened. And the name Soko literally means it's like a wall. It's like taking branches and everything else that forms a fence. That's the idea of Soko, and the reason why it was named that is it was a fence that kept them out. And so now you have the Philistines that are right on the border. This particular land is a valley that comes between the mountain range that gives them full access to the land of Israel. And so if Israel loses this, they lose a key strategic military point in Israel.
Yeah, we kind of miss out.
When I went to Israel, some of these things become so fascinating. Like you could literally see the mountains and the valleys where David and Goliath would have fought. Now there's a road just going through, and apparently that brook that was there is dried up. But you could tell that there used to be a river there, a brook there. It's not there anymore, though.
On that, as we read the story of David and Goliath sometimes, we see that it's just these fight between these two guys, but there's real huge dramatic consequences as two armies are staring each other down. And I mean, I don't know about you, but I don't really want to enter into the border of blood. So I'm sure they're wondering, okay, what's going to happen in this moment?
Yeah, and so what you find in the story is there's this guy named Goliath that we're going to meet in a moment. And he's this massive guy, and he comes out and he's taunting the armies of Israel. And it goes on for 40 days where you have the Israelites on one mountain range, and across the valley on another mountain range, you have the Philistines. And he's coming out and he's mocking God and he's mocking the Israelites, and he's challenging them. You send out a champion to fight me. And if you find anybody in your army who can defeat me, then all of our people will be your slaves. But if you defeat me, then all of our people will be your slaves. And this is what's called a champion battle. And you find that in the ancient world. So one of the more famous ones is the battle between Achilles and Hector. If you know the story of Greek history, where you have these two guys that go out and they battle one another, and whoever wins, that army wins. And it was kind of like the lead dog on each side fights, and it spares the armies. And so
I don't know if I like that, though. I mean, it's nice less people die, but would people actually surrender if their main man dies? I don't know. War is just so inconceivable to me, and I hate it. Hate to think about it. But it's something that was very, very real in the Old Testament, and the Israelites constantly had to deal with.
So Goliath is saying, let's have a champion battle. I'll represent all my people. You give me one to represent all your people, and whoever wins, wins. And so big stakes, but for 40 days, the Israelites are so afraid, not only of the Philistines who have, strategic advantage, but they're afraid of this massive giant of a man. And so David will come onto the scene, we'll see in a little bit. His father sends him.
What is that picture? Looks like some kind of lion or something, animal.
With supplies for war to bring to his brothers. You bring some bread, some wine. Don't miss that, because that's the emblems of communion. And he comes onto the stage, and here's Goliath, and he's not having it.
Right, so you've mentioned Goliath, and you've mentioned the fact that every part of the Israelite army is terrified of this guy. So why are they so scared of him?
Well, they're scared of him, one, because he's coming with all the Philistine equipment, but even more than that, this guy's massive. And, you'll see some cartoons where, they depict Goliath like he's 50 foot or something crazy like that.
Godzilla style.
Yeah, no, it's not that extreme. So, but if you look at 1 Samuel 17, verse 4, it says, there came out from the camp of the Philistines a champion. There it is. This is a champion battle. A champion named Goliath of Gath. Gath is his hometown. And it says whose height was 6 cubits and a span. Well, a cubit in the ancient world was a form of measurement, and it went from your elbow to your fingertip. So traditionally, that's about 18 inches, and a span is the distance of your hand. And so if you do, 18 inches times 6 cubits, that's 1.5 feet, times 6, that's 9 feet plus another 6 inches. So this guy is 9'6". And so when you're looking at him, he is towering over everyone else. And so he's a massive person. In our modern times, for just context, the Guinness Book of World Records says that the tallest man that's been measured in modernity, goes back to the 1940s, was a guy named Robert Wadlow. And he measured 8'11". So 7.
That is tall, but here's the problem. For whatever reason, the Septuagint and the manuscripts in the Dead Sea Scrolls have Goliath at 6'9", like a 4 cubits long in a span, or whatever you want to call it, which is interesting. And the Messianic manuscripts have him at 9 feet tall. So which one is it?
Inches short of where Goliath would have been. But like I said, it's not beyond the realm of possibilities that you could have a guy this massive. It's close to the tallest that we see here today in modernity.
And Goliath isn't the first, let's say, giant that we've seen in the scriptures, right?
Correct. So if you go back to the days of Moses, when Moses is leading the people out of Egypt, he goes through the wilderness, and then he's telling the people, like, you're going to go and you're going to take the promised land. And there's a famous story where he sends the 12 spies in, and 10 of them come back, and they're terrified because they say the people that are in this land make us look like grasshoppers in their sight. Like, they're just absolutely massive. And Moses himself in Deuteronomy chapter 9 is telling them that they're going to have to go in and fight. And listen to how he describes them: against a people great and tall, the sons of the Anakim, whom you know and of whom you have heard it said, who can stand before the sons of Anak?
So this is the wild thing. I wonder what they think. The Anakim are supposed to be descendants of the Nephilim. Are they sons of the Nephilim? Are they descendants from the sons of God, offspring of these fallen angels, perhaps? Is this what is going on? Because they even use those phrases when they're describing the people in Jericho and why they're afraid. There's also Og of Bashan, the king there, who had a 13-foot bed. Maybe just like the massive bed, or he just needed that big of a bed because he was that tall. I don't know.
And so there's this people group called the Anakim that through the Old Testament is associated with being massive.
Okay.
And Goliath is one of them, one of the very few of them that's left.
So as we talk about these giants in the Bible, part of what we love about this show is taking something that maybe when we read it in the scriptures sounds crazy, it sounds outlandish, but a lot of times we find it rooted in history and archaeology. Is there any part where these guys play a role in that?
Yeah, there's actually a guy whose name is Alan Johnson, and he comes out of Wheaton College. And when he was looking, he's saying, like, is there anything to the Anakim? Like, did they exist? And one of the things that he found is when he went to Egypt, there was something called execration texts. And in Egypt, what they would do if they had an enemy that they absolutely hated is they would make like pottery, and they would write their name or capture their image on the pottery, and then they would go out, they would put a curse on these people, and then they would smash the jar, as
No
in
way.
like, I'm smashing you, and that's going to be your fate. And so they have found execration, a jar with the Anakim name on it. So Egypt looked at the Anakim, ancient Egypt, before David, and they had problems with this people group called the Anakim.
I did not know that. And people, like I said, they like to say that Anakim were the descendants of the Nephilim. And that's crazy. I think that's just another collaboration and evidence for the Bible being authentic, being reliable. What they say is not just all made up. There are these people groups.
So that's interesting. Another thing that's fascinating is there's a professor that came out of Bar Ilan University, and his name's Aaron Mayer. And he found when they were excavating the Philistine city of Gath, you remember what's significant about Gath?
Goliath.
That's where Goliath comes from. And it just so happens that they found pottery that dates back to the 10th century BC, which is right in the time frame. And on this pottery, it has the name Goliath.
Wow.
And now they didn't use vowels back then. And so a lot of people are like, well, it might not be Goliath, but everybody says it's remarkably similar. Like, it's for sure telling us that that's a common name among the Philistines. If it wasn't the Goliath, it's certainly a Goliath. And
Wow. From the 10th century BC.
so that adds some credibility to the story. And I think perhaps my favorite one is when you go into Egypt, because remember, Egypt is, they've got the excavation text with the Anakim mentioned on it. But they actually, before David, about 250 years before David is born, they have a battle of Kadesh, and this is where the Egyptians are fighting the Hittites. And if you know geography, for the Egyptians to get up to the Hittites to fight the Battle of Kadesh, they have to go through the coastal territory of the Philistines with their armies to get there. And so they run across these people that they call the Shashu, which means wanderers. So they don't name their nationality or whatever, but they're saying in this particular territory, there's these people called the Shasu, and you can see in this image that you have Egyptians that are next to these kneeling Shasu, and these people are gargantuan. Yeah. Kneeling, they're every bit as tall as the Egyptians are, which is crazy because in Egyptian artwork, you always find the Egyptians larger than their enemies. The pharaoh is almost like a giant always, and they're just tiny in his sight. What? So you never saw the Egyptians portraying their enemies as being larger than them. And yet in this particular artwork with the Shasu that are coming from the Philistine territories, these guys are massive. And also with this, you find something called the Anastasi papyrus that comes from Egypt during this time, and it's with people that were happening during the Battle of Kadesh. And so they would send scribes with their military, right, to go keep track of what's happening in the battle, to give a report back to Pharaoh, to keep a historical record. And two of the scribes are Hori and a guy named Amenemopi. And Hori is absolutely crushing, Amenemopi, making fun of him for being a coward. But I want you to listen to why Hori is saying that Amenemopi is a coward. Listen to the record. He says, the narrow defile, so the little piece of land between the Mediterranean and the mountain ranges where the Philistines are, the narrow defile is infested with shasu concealed beneath the bushes. Some of them are 4 cubits or of 5 cubits. Now, an Egyptian cubit's 20 inches, a little bit bigger than a Hebrew cubit.
Oh, wow.
From nose to foot. So it's not even the full measurement. I'm not even sure what that means from nose to foot. He says they're fierce of face. Their heart is not mild. They hearken not to coaxing. You can't talk sense to these people. They're angry. They're aggressive. They're warlike, and they measure 5 cubits. Now, that's 8.5 feet. So, which is actually, when you look at the artwork that we see with those shasu, that's to scale. They would have been.
That's crazy. Wow. So fascinating. Man, this is a really good channel. Definitely go check them out, subscribe, because this is very, very perspective and interesting. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense, and it just points to there actually being giants. They're actually being really, really tall people. I don't know if it has anything to do with the Nephilim or not. I would love to know. But yeah, go if you want to watch the rest of the video. I will have the link in the description. But yeah, guys, I would love to know what you think in the comments below. I think this is just amazing evidence for a creator, evidence for that the Bible is reliable and that we can trust in what it says. There's nothing ever in this world that debunks God's word. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. I encourage you to hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't. I'm trying to hit 100,000 subscribers by the end of the year, and I know we can do it with your help. So thank you so much for all the love and support. It means the world. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. God bless.